You can't afford anything here. Go away.
The boutique smelled like expensive leather and exclusivity. Maryam stood near the entrance, her fingers grazing the edge of a silk scarf displayed on a glass counter. She'd been inside for maybe 3 minutes, but the saleswoman, a reed-thin Korean woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, had already circled her twice like a hawk tracking prey. "Miss, those are very delicate," the woman said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in one of the shops downstairs." Maryam looked up. "I'm just browsing." "Of course." The saleswoman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But our items here are quite specialized, premium clientele only. I'm sure you understand." The meaning landed like a slap. Maryam had dealt with this before, the suspicious glances, the hovering, the thinly veiled suggestions that she didn't belong. She was used to it, but that didn't make it sting any less. She was about to leave when another voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" The saleswoman's entire demeanor shifted. Her spine straightened, her face went pale, and that condescending smile evaporated. Maryam turned to see who'd caused such a dramatic reaction. He stood near the back of the store, half hidden by a rack of designer coats. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Maryam's rent for 6 months, and his eyes, cold, calculating, were fixed on the saleswoman like a predator who just spotted movement in the grass. "Mr. Son," the saleswoman stammered, "I didn't realize you were. You were just what?" His voice was quiet, but it carried weight, authority, the kind that made people shrink. "Helping a customer, because from where I'm standing it looked like you were doing the opposite." The woman's mouth opened and closed uselessly. Maryam felt caught between confusion and curiosity. She didn't know who this man was, but clearly he had power here. Real power. "I apologize for any misunderstanding," the saleswoman said quickly, bowing slightly. "I'll personally assist." "No." Son moved forward, his footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. He stopped a few feet from Maryam, his gaze shifting to her. Up close, she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his eyes held something dangerous beneath their calm surface. "You'll go to the back, now." The saleswoman fled, without another word. Silence settled over the boutique. Maryam should have felt grateful, maybe even relieved, but instead she felt exposed. This stranger had just upended the situation entirely, and she wasn't sure why. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "I know." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "But she was out of line." "Happens all the time." "That doesn't make it acceptable." Maryam crossed her arms. "And you are?" "Son," he didn't offer a last name. "I own this building." Of course he did. That explained the saleswoman's panic. Maryam glanced around the boutique with new understanding. "So this is your place?" "One of them." His expression didn't change. "Were you looking for something specific?" She hesitated. The truth was, she'd wandered in on impulse. The boutique was in Gangnam, a part of Seoul where money flowed like water and people like her, foreign, young, not wealthy, stuck out like weeds in a manicured garden. She'd been curious, maybe a little defiant. Now she felt foolish. "Just browsing," she repeated. "Browse properly, then." Son gestured toward the racks. "Take your time." It wasn't quite an invitation, but it wasn't dismissal either. Maryam found herself moving deeper into the store, her fingers trailing over fabrics that felt like liquid under her touch. She could feel him watching her, and it set her nerves on edge. Not in a bad way, in a way that made her hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. She picked up a leather jacket, examining the stitching. "You always rescue strangers from rude salespeople." "No." He moved to stand across from her, separated by a circular display of handbags. "But I don't tolerate disrespect in my establishments. Bad for business." So it's about the bottom line." "Partially." His eyes met hers, and something flickered there, amusement, maybe, or interest. "And partially because I don't like watching people get treated like they're invisible." Maryam set the jacket down. You're different from what I expected. You expected something. Rich guy who owns half of Gangnam. Yeah, I had a mental picture. You don't quite fit it. How so? She considered him, the way he stood perfectly still, the controlled power in his posture, the scar that hinted at a past that probably wasn't spent in boardrooms. You seem like someone who's seen things, done things, not just inherited daddy's money and played businessman. For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. Perceptive. I pay attention. I noticed. He checked his watch, a sleek piece that caught the light. I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Maryam raised an eyebrow. That a line? A request. From the guy who owns the building. Feels a little like a command. It's not. Son reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, matte black with silver lettering. He held it out. But if you're interested, my number's there. Dinner. Somewhere less pretentious than this. She took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact sent a jolt through her, unexpected and electric. You ask out everyone you rescue. No, his eyes held hers. Just you. Before she could respond, he was moving toward the door, his presence filling the space even as he left it. The saleswoman reappeared from the back, looking shaken and apologetic, offering assistance in a voice that trembled slightly. Maryam barely heard her. She stared at the card in her hand, at the name embossed in silver, Son Min-jun. She should have thrown it away, should have walked out and forgotten the whole strange encounter. But something stopped her, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, like she was someone worth noticing. She slipped the card into her pocket and left the boutique. She had no idea that the man she'd just met controlled half of Seoul's underground, that his name was whispered in back alleys and feared in boardrooms, that getting involved with him would drag her into a world where loyalty was currency and betrayal was death. All she knew was that, for the first time in months, something interesting had happened. And she wanted more. Maryam didn't call him for 3 days. She told herself it was because she was busy, picking up extra shifts at the language academy where she taught English, helping her roommate move furniture, catching up on sleep she'd been missing for weeks. But the real reason sat heavier in her chest, fear mixed with fascination. Men like Son Min-jun didn't hand out their numbers to random women in boutiques without reason. And whatever his reason was, Maryam wasn't sure she wanted to find out. Still, the card stayed in her wallet. She'd catch herself touching it sometimes, running her thumb over the embossed lettering like it might reveal secrets through texture alone. On the 4th day, her roommate found it. Who's this? Nia held up the card, squinting at the name. Son Min-jun, girl, this is fancy. Where'd you meet someone with a card like this? Maryam snatched it back. Nowhere, just some guy. Just some guy with matte black business cards. In Gangnam. Nia's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. You're holding out on me. There's nothing to hold out. He gave me his number. I haven't called. Why the hell not? Because something about him scared her. Not in the way the saleswoman's disdain had. That was familiar, manageable. Son scared her because he'd looked at her like he could see straight through her careful defenses, past the confidence she wore like armor, into the parts of herself she kept hidden. That kind of seeing was dangerous. He's too old for me, Maryam said instead. Nia snorted. He could be 60 for all I care if he's got that kind of money. Call him. I'm not calling him. Then I will. Nia. But her roommate was already dialing, her fingers flying over Maryam's phone screen. Maryam lunged for it, but Nia danced away, the phone already ringing. Hello, the voice that answered was deep, measured. Even through the speaker, it carried authority. Who is this? Nia's confidence faltered for half a second before she recovered. Hi, this is Nia. I'm calling on behalf of Maryam, the woman you met at the boutique. She's been meaning to call you back, but she's been busy and... Maryam ripped the phone from Nia's hand. I'm so sorry. My roommate is she's... It's fine. Son's voice held a trace of amusement. I was beginning to think you'd thrown away my card. I considered it. But you didn't. No, Maryam shot Nia a murderous glare. Her roommate grinned and mouthed, "You're welcome," before disappearing into her bedroom. I didn't. Good, are you free tonight? Maryam's heart kicked against her ribs. Maybe. 8 o'clock, I'll send a car. I can take the subway. You could, but you won't. It wasn't arrogance in his voice, just certainty, like he'd already mapped out how this would go and saw no reason for deviation. Text me your address. He hung up before she could argue. Maryam stared at her phone, torn between irritation and something that felt dangerously close to excitement. She should cancel, make up an excuse, put distance between herself and whatever this was before it became complicated. Instead, she texted him her address. The car arrived at 7:45, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who opened the door for her without speaking. Maryam had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that walked the line between casual and elegant. She felt underdressed the moment she slid into the leather interior. They drove through Seoul as the city transformed from day to night, neon signs flickering to life like electronic fireflies. The driver took roads Maryam didn't recognize, moving away from the crowded shopping districts into quieter neighborhoods where buildings sat farther apart and walls grew higher. They stopped in front of a restaurant that didn't advertise itself. No sign, no menu displayed outside. Just a plain door set into a stone wall, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who looked like they could break bones as easily as they breathed. The driver opened her door. One of the suited men nodded and pulled open the restaurant door. Inside was another world entirely. Low lighting, rich wood paneling, tables spaced far enough apart that conversations couldn't bleed into each other. Maybe a dozen people total, all dressed like they belonged in magazines. Maryam's stomach tightened. Son waited at a corner table, rising when he saw her. He'd traded the black suit for charcoal gray, but the effect was the same, power wrapped in expensive fabric. His eyes tracked her movement across the room, and Maryam felt evaluated in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. You came, he said as she reached the table. You doubted I would. I considered the possibility. He pulled out her chair. I'm glad I was wrong. Maryam sat, hyper-aware of how close he was, the faint scent of his cologne, something dark and woody. This place is intense. It's private. I thought you'd prefer that after the boutique. He wasn't wrong. The memory of the saleswoman's contempt still stung. Do you bring all your dates here? I don't date. Son returned to his seat, his movements economical and precise. This is new territory for me too. Somehow I doubt that. Believe what you want. He gestured to the menu, handwritten in Korean and English. Everything here is excellent, but if you trust me, I can order for both of us. Maryam met his eyes across the table. Trust. What a loaded word coming from a man she barely knew. Okay. He ordered in rapid Korean, his voice taking on a different quality when he spoke his native language, sharper, more commanding. The server bowed deeply before leaving. So, Maryam said, leaning back in her chair, what do you actually do, Son Min-jun, besides own buildings and rescue women in boutiques? Import and export mostly, some real estate, investments. His answer came smoothly practiced. What about you? What brings a young woman from? He paused. Nigeria. Kenya, my family moved there when I was young. Maryam watched his face for any reaction, but he simply nodded, filing away the information. I teach English. Came to Seoul 2 years ago on a teaching contract. And you stayed. The city grew on me, even with its complications. She traced the rim of her water glass. You grew up here. Born and raised. Something flickered across his expression, a shadow of memory, maybe regret. Though the Seoul I knew as a child doesn't exist anymore, everything changes. That's not always bad. No, he agreed, but change has costs someone always pays. The food arrived in waves, delicate banchan, perfectly grilled meat, soup that steamed like morning fog. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easier than Maryam expected. Son asked questions that dug deeper than surface pleasantries, what she missed most about home, what scared her, what she wanted from life. And when she turned those questions back on him, he answered with a candor that surprised her. "I'm not a good man, Maryam." He said it matter-of-factly, cutting into his beef. "I want you to understand that from the beginning." "What does that mean?" "It means I've done things that would make you walk away if you knew the details. It means the world I operate in doesn't forgive weakness or mistakes. It means getting close to me comes with risks." Maryam set down her chopsticks. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserve honesty." His eyes held hers. "And because despite my better judgment, I want you around, but only if you choose it knowing what you're walking into." "You're being cryptic." "I'm being careful." Son reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "I'm giving you an out before this goes further. Take it if you're smart." Maryam looked at his hand, scarred knuckles, a thin white line across his palm. Hands that had built empires and probably destroyed things too. She should listen to the warning bells going off in her head, thank him for dinner, and disappear back into her safe, uncomplicated life. Instead, she placed her hand over his. "I've never been that smart," she said. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and Maryam felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Whatever came next, danger, discovery, disaster, she was choosing it with her eyes open. Son smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and Maryam realized she was already in deeper than she'd thought.